Fall Focus is presented by the Michigan State Medical Society Alliance. We have nothing to do with Michigan State University, a little bit, but we have everything to do with physicians and physician families in the state of Michigan. We select a public health topic each fall to present to our communities and help advance the health of our citizens through advocacy, education, and action. I am Lisa Hildorf. I am the past president of the Michigan State Medical Society Alliance and current leadership for Ingham County. Gun violence, a public health crisis. Ann Emmerich is going to be your MC today, and I want to welcome her to the stage to take over.
Thank you, Lisa. But before we get started, Cindy, Janie, and Val would like to present something to you and Tammy for organizing today's event. So if you'd come up, they have some flowers for you.
So on behalf of the co-presidents, and Donna Lake is not with us, but Val Doan, Janie Gugino, and myself, and the board for the 2023 Alliance, State Alliance. We just want to thank Lisa for all of her work, and then of course, as Lisa mentioned, Tammy's pretty much the backbone of the Medical Society Alliance and has been for many years. So we just thank them. So thank you.
Well, how appropriate we are having this event on World Mental Health Day, because mental health, as Lisa said, does play a big role in gun violence, unfortunately. I'm sure there's no one in this room that wasn't rocked by the events of February 13th of this year when we heard the news and saw the ambulances and the sights and sounds around campus. I was at work that day. I heard it on the scanner. I had a niece and nephew on campus who were frightened and scared, and at the same time I was trying to get the information, the correct information on the air so that we weren't frightening people needlessly. A lot of times on the police scanner, you hear things and they turn out not to be true, but that night I just had a gut feeling it was true, and unfortunately it was. So where do we begin to educate and work for change and stop gun violence? It seems like we're always hearing about a shooting at a school or a mall. And how can we stop it? This discussion is not meant to be political or controversial. It has the sole purpose of informing. Our first speaker today is Denny Martin, DO, a Sparrow Hospital president. Dr. Martin was the chief medical officer during the February 13th Level 1 trauma response to the gun violence on campus. The world was given a look at the excellent, compassionate care delivered during this night of violence, and the accolades of efficiency and success can rest on Dr. Martin's shoulders. A Spartan graduate, an OB/GYN physician, Dr. Martin has been in leadership positions to support, improve, and care for our community for many years. We invite Dr. Martin to offer his view for this Fall Focus audience. Dr. Martin?
Seat.
It's just testing. Here we go. Casual conversation. I hope everyone can see us. We can stand if you can't. But I'm sure you can hear us. Now, Sparrow, Dr. Martin, was given accolades for the efficiency of the medical care provided the evening of February 13th. What aspect of this care gives you the most pride?
A lot of it, we're talking with some reporters outside, the whole thing and just, how the team came together. It truly, not one person, certainly not me. I got to be in front of the camera more than I like to be after that, but it truly was a team coming together and really just focusing on algorithms, processes that we've talked about, we've developed, we've practiced for so many years. And that we followed through with it exactly as we should have, as we wanted to, as we practiced, when the community needed us most.
Give us a timeline of the sequence of events that night. Now, the call came in at what time to the hospital? I think it was 8:18 when the call went into 911.
Yeah.
And talk to us about the data-driven chain of responsibilities that ensued.
Yeah, I need to look at some notes here for that timeline, but 8:18 PM was the first call into the local 911, AM County 911, that there was shots fired on MSU's campus. I believe the first MSU alert was around 8:30 PM. We were notified at Sparrow, our administrator on call, at about 8:33, and then sent out our system-wide alert of a potential mass casualty event at 8:34. And then starting at 8:44, we started receiving notifications of patients en route, and then every minute, so 8:44, 45, 46, 47, with arrival times of 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 8 minutes, 6 minutes, and 3 minutes. So if you do the math there, really all of the victims arrived within about a 5 to 6 minute period to the hospital.
Can I just ask you, what was going through your mind when you learned of the situation?
You know, there's the obvious emotional response to, this is really happening. Unfortunately, I think we've all thought about it and knew that it was a reality, but it doesn't set in that it's real until you get that phone call. So to me, I was thankfully I was just south of the Capitol. I wasn't too far away from the hospital. I might have driven a little fast above some speed limit signs to get here, so I apologize. But for me, it just, and the rest of the team, I think we went into this is our business. This is why we are a level 1 trauma center. This is why we're here for the community. We put these processes in place, and we have these algorithms to really help us in what could be a very emotionally charged event. And if we let our emotional decision making take over, that's when we miss steps or forget about things that we're supposed to do. So really relying on those processes and algorithms is what we did that night. And I think that's why we were so successful.
So what are the criteria for a level 1 trauma?
So the criteria around a level 1 trauma center is really about the immediate availability of highly specialized services. So we have a trauma surgeon in the hospital all the time, 24/7. We have anesthesia services in the hospital 24/7. There's not a time when we couldn't take a patient from the emergency room directly to the OR within a matter of 10 to 15 minutes. And then it's about the immediate or urgent availability of services like thoracic surgery, vascular surgery, neurosurgery, ear, nose, and throat, plastic and reconstructive surgery, all those services that we have here that can have a response time to the hospital within 15 minutes for some, 30 minutes for others. But then also the availability to staff up and expand resources. We usually plan that we could run 2 ORs all night long if we needed to. That evening, so much staff came in that we had the ability to run 9 operating rooms even at 2 or 3 in the morning. So having that ability to flex up staffing to pretty urgently respond to any kind of injury any time of the day are the requirements for a level 1 trauma center. And again, just as a reminder, there's only 10 in the state of Michigan, most of them highly concentrated in southeast Michigan. So when you think about the next level 1 trauma center to Lansing, you have to go east to Flint, west to Grand Rapids, and I believe north to Traverse City. Is that right, Dr. Munoz? So there's a lot of geography of the state of Michigan that Sparrow Hospital really serves as the closest regional level 1 trauma center.
We have many medical students and residents with us today, so please share with them the most important critical skill to develop as our future healthcare professionals. Would it be AI, Zoom, WebEx skills?
No, I'm those things, sorry. The next generation of medical professionals will certainly interact with technology and medicine in a very different way than when I was trained at a time when we wrote notes in a chart with pens and you could barely read them, and that's just very different now for our current learners. The biggest skill to me, and I think where you'll draw the most enjoyment and satisfaction in your career, is really learning how to reach your patient. Communication skills, and how to interact with other members of your team. There's so much chatting and snapping and all these other things that we do virtually where we don't, say the spoken word to people. And it's just really, I think always in medicine, the time, the skill that will never go away is communication, how you reach your patient, how you interact with staff members. I think that will always be the most critical skill for any healthcare professional.
Talk about how it's changed you as a person and as a doctor and some of your colleagues, this event.
It's certainly made this kind of event, more of a reality for us, which is an unfortunate state that we're in today. It's, for us at Sparrow Hospital, it's really, this is an unfortunate part of what we do, and not to be the downer to start the meeting, but, the shooting or gun-related violence in our community is on the rise. And this event obviously received a lot of attention, not just here locally, but across the country and the world. But gun-related violence is on the rise. There's also other events that we at Sparrow Hospital have to plan for. We are close to an airport. There's a lot of industry in this area. There's, battery facilities going on. We have to be ready for other types of mass casualty events or industrial accidents. So it's made us think more broadly of what Sparrow means to the community and what we need to be prepared for. As physicians and caregivers, it's, this is part of what we do when we made the commitment to this career. So it's, we learn from events like this and how well our teams responded and how well we followed those processes and followed those algorithms to make sure that we deliver great care. And we'll be there the next time. Hopefully not an event like this happens, but the next time our community needs us, we'll be there and we'll be ready.
Thank you so much, Dr. Denny Martin. And we will have time for questions with him when we are through with our speakers. Thank you so much. Our next voice will be that of Stephen Izzo, a lifelong resident of East Lansing, an honors graduate of Michigan State University, currently pursuing a master's degree, proud member of MSU men's basketball team, and an all-around wonderful person. Stephen found himself in harm's way on the evening of February 13th near the Student Union building, and we invite him to voice some answers to some of the questions we have. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. Seat. So let's talk about the moment you heard something was happening on campus and how you felt, what you remember about that moment.
So I remember that day pretty clearly. I was at Breslin, and my girlfriend she's an education major. She was in the human ecology building, and her class got out at like 8:50 around then. So I said I'd pick her up so she didn't have to walk on campus just late at night and everything. And I remember I was on the phone with one of my buddies, and a cop car drove by me going super fast, and I was on MAC, and I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh, that was really fast. And then 2 other cop cars flew by me, so I was like, I gotta hang up. I don't really know what's going on. He's like, yeah, it's going pretty fast. And I remember I was pulling up to past the red light, and I was figuring out what I was gonna do or whatever. And all the cop cars were outside the human ecology building from the Union to Berkey, and I decided that I was going to pull on Abbott Road with the roundabout where the Union is. I decided to pull in there. Didn't really know what was going on. Then there was cop cars behind me and SWAT and bigger SUVs that pulled up, and I didn't know what was going on. Officer got out of his car, grabbing weapons and stuff, kind of just first responder things. And then there was a group of students to the right of my car, and I heard someone yell something about a gun, and then everyone took off running. And still in my car, didn't really know, rolled down my window to ask the officer, like, what to do. He said there was a active shooter, and my car was, at this point, pretty much sandwiched in between. I couldn't really do anything. So I ended up being able to pull off onto the sidewalk, and I drove on the sidewalk. I looped back around, and I kind of parked by Kenzie Hall. I ended up calling my mom, telling her what was going on, and I was like, there's an active shooter. My girlfriend, her name's Keely. I was like, Keely's in a building by there. I don't really know what's going on. Had no clue. Pulled over, went to Kenzie, kind of in between there, and I sat in my car waiting for, hopefully if people were able to escape, they'd run, kind of get people in my car or whatever, get her, and then kind of go to safety after that. Got a phone call that, obviously with all the people calling in, there was a lot of information that was kind of all over the place. Got a phone call that it was kind of close there, so I left, went to Breslin, and I stayed there until 1-ish in the morning.
And there's actually a protocol for student athletes. Their coach is sort of their parent on campus, right? So talk about that and how the basketball players were how they all found out and what you were told to do.
Yeah, so kind of with athletics, you're not just worried about one player and everything, so we were getting updated by our staff. So everyone was texting, where are you? We'd get phone calls where everyone was. There was everyone else was in their apartment. There was me and another kid were in buildings on campus, so kind of locked in, but obviously safe, and just happy to be safe, or lucky to be safe. And then obviously sports and everything was canceled on campus, so I know that some guys went home, some guys went to my parents' house for breakfast and dinner the next morning, or just to kind of be with each other and be hunkered down, because some guys couldn't go to their family's house if they lived further away, and just stuff like that. But they did a very good job at, updating us and making sure that we're good, and texting us and keeping us in the loop with what was going on.
So your girlfriend is in the union, right?
The human ecology building.
Oh, okay.
Which
So
is it's in
yeah.
between Berkey, yeah.
So how did you meet up with her?
So she ended up getting out. She was locked in the bathroom on like the 4th or 5th floor with 70 other classmates of hers, and they ended up getting let out. She ended up getting a ride back with just someone that was random in her class to her dorm, and then when she got dropped off, I went and picked her up and took her back to her parents for the weekend or whatever it was, week.
When you look back on that day, does it bring back the feelings that you had? I mean, it had to be very frightening to be there as this is all unfolding.
Yeah, just kind of turning onto the street, and East Lansing's always been my home. It's always ever going to be my home. Just the stress of how it makes students that aren't necessarily from here, or just in general the public eye, saying that it's not a safe place. It's all I've ever known, and has been safe for me for 23 years, and a couple bad days, couple bad nights don't really make this place to be the worst, and kind of it's tough that other people have bad memories of this campus and this university.
So when did you first learn in your educational environment about active shooter safety, and did you know what to do?
I would say it was taught around probably 3rd grade. I think that's when it became more common. I don't really know. I was trying to think of that question. It was just like the pre-answer, I guess. I remember learning about it, but I remember it ramping up more in high school and going on lockdowns. Not that they were, a threat to the school or a building where I was, but just in the area. Just because we're close to Frandor, we're close to the city and everything. So I remember practicing lockdowns and stuff, or having to go on lockdown, but obviously way less dangerous situations, and kind of figuring out the protocols of, hiding, covering knees and everything, and kind of folding over.
Do you feel safe on campus? Are you happy with the upgrades that they've made to security, swiping the IDs on the doors after 6?
Yeah, I think they've done a good job with security. I think there's a lot more to do, but obviously that's going to come kind of, it's periodically. It is expensive to do all that stuff, so I understand it, and there's definitely more to do, and I trust that the university is going to make this place as safe as it possibly can be.
How has your life changed emotionally since this event?
I would say I'm getting a lot better now. I haven't really had too many run-ins with trauma, I guess. But when it first happened, for weeks or months, I would say, when I would sleep, I could hear sirens just because I was in, I guess, I was in the area with the police sirens going on and the lights. And I just hear the siren, or I heard the sirens going to bed and stuff, and it was constant, like my ears were ringing, but it only sounded like police sirens. But yeah, that was really the only trauma that I had after, I guess. And then just kind of just a sadness, and just it was a traumatizing event, and at a place I love, and that's pretty much it. It's just hard to see that something so bad could happen to some place that you love so much.
Well, thank you for sharing your story with us today. We're going to have questions for Stephen later, and we'll move on to our next speaker. Thank you, Stephen. Public safety professionals are expected to be perfect in every situation, whether it's removing a cat from a tree, apprehending someone who is considered a risk to public safety, or writing a speeding ticket to an elderly woman on her way to bingo. We will never know the extensive pressure you experience, but we all know to admire and appreciate the fact that you are willing to stand up and assume this profession. Our next voice is Deputy Adam Kammer of the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, Emergency Response and Preparedness Division, Training Unit /SWAT. Oakland County responded with aid the night of February 13th, 2023, and assisted with investigation and logistics throughout the following days. I would like to welcome Deputy Adam Kammer from Oakland County. All right, we have a PowerPoint presentation as well, so he's going to get set up for that.
Some of your questions will go directly to this.
Do you want to use this microphone? You can. It's up to you.
It's up to you. I can sit down there with you. I don't want you to sit.
That's all right, I can stand.
Yeah, if you want to stand, that'd be great. Okay. Good on there? Good. Okay.
All right.
I'll just use
Okay.
Okay.
That might provide feedback, so you can turn that
One or
on.
the other. Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Test. Okay. Good.
All right. So let's talk about the training that you had to go through to prepare for the position you are in now.
So it's somewhat a two-parted training, or a two-parted career, I guess. My partner Shane down there and I have both been with the department 25 plus years. Both of us on our SWAT team for about 20 years. But when you get old, your physical attributes are not as appreciated as your experience that you have. So to give you a little background on Shane and I, we were both at Oxford. Shane was one of the first guys in the building. I was there with the SWAT response to the building. And for MSU, same thing. We're hearing it on the radio as all of us are gearing up saying, hey, are we going to go be part of this? And we ended up here with that also. So that side of our career is the police response to it. But like I said, because I have bad knees and bad shoulders and a whole bunch of other things that somewhat limit my ability to respond, we have also been put in this role of trainers, not just to our department, but since Oxford happened especially, what can we give to the public to say, hey, we're doing everything we can to get in the building, to get there as fast as we can, but there is a timeline that we are not there, that we don't have control over what's going on inside that building. What can we do to help civilians respond to this? And like Stephen was saying, it's funny that when I go talk to high school kids, I'm a broken record to them, right? They have heard this over and over and over. But if I go talk to a church where you've got 56-year-old people, this is the first time they're hearing any of this. All they knew when there was a problem when they were in school was to hide under the desk, right? To just put their head down and hide. So the other side of what Shane and I are doing and what is becoming almost our full-time job and how we ended up here, or I should say over here, is someone had been to one of our presentations and said, hey, that was really helpful information. Maybe we could pass that on to a group up here. So that's the other side. That's what we do now is we have this PowerPoint, and I'm going to breeze through some of it just to kind of give you guys an idea of what we talk about. It's normally about an hour and a half, 2-hour training that we put people through. But that's kind of our careers. That's what mine has morphed into, and that's kind of what I do now.
What are the top 3 most dangerous places for gun violence? Public places.
So this is interesting, and it will kind of feed into the PowerPoint and into the final question that we're going to talk about, but it's always changing, right? Schools, for a while there, were the easy target. Schools is where the active shooter incidents were happening. But if any of you guys have kids now and have tried to get into your schools, I hope they're like my kid's school. I feel like I had to get a retina scan just to go through the front door, right? They really do a exceptional good job where my kids go to school, they passed a bond, and the bond was all about the security of the schools. So they changed everything they do. So schools, thankfully, are becoming hardened targets. They're becoming harder places to get into. So you're seeing, thankfully, that number drop. The one you're seeing now exploding off the charts is open places, right? Open high school football games, the Las Vegas shooting where he just stood up. And so right now, open spaces is the #1 place that you're seeing these happen at. Places of commerce, places open to the public are almost always going to be, just because it's such a large category, is going to be kind of your second place. And then it seems like churches and schools and all those other places where people gather are kind of all hang out in that third area. But because, and I stress this, because we're doing such a good job of training our kids and our teachers, and I don't mean me, I mean us as the public are saying this is important, that you're seeing those numbers finally go down. And I kind of talk about it like when I was a kid, like CPR was a new thing, and people were like, hey, if we could train your average citizen to do CPR to help save those people's lives until professional medical help can get there, how much better off would we be? I feel that's where we are now with this type of training, that like, hey, if we get a group of people like this that say, hey, I know what to do, I know how we can help, and if you talk to anybody from Oxford, and unfortunately Shane and I have been through all the surveillance video and everything that went on in that school, it was a horrible event. It could have been so much worse if those kids had not been trained, kids and teachers had not been trained on how to respond. So anyway, long answer to your question is, those are kind of the top 3, but it's always moving based on what we're doing differently and what the public is doing.
So what are the top 3 safety precautions we can take as people who are in these arenas every day?
So this is where this PowerPoint comes into play. And like I said, I'm going to kind of try to breeze through it so we're not, here past our lunchtime, but I'll give you guys a general idea of what we're teaching, what the federal government is basically saying this run, hide, fight model is working, and kind of give you an idea of how we teach it. And then if anyone, especially if you're closer to Oakland County, it makes our life easier, but our sheriff has basically said, hey, this is important, get the word out. If it means you gotta travel to Lansing or you've gotta go to churches on Sunday to get the word out, that's what we're doing. So if you want, I'll kind of push through this PowerPoint a little bit, and then maybe generate some questions that we can talk about later. So we start by talking about what we have learned, what is changing our response. And in 2022, the FBI put out these statistics. And again, I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're going to show you something that we all already know, right? That the numbers are increasing, that the numbers are going up, the amount of incidents are going up. What we are finding is that in a lot of those incidents like Oxford, the casualties are going down because we're doing a better job of locking down and getting our, when I talk about this, I almost just always say kids, because as a father of three, like, that's the most important thing we're going to talk about. So, you know, are we keeping these kids safe? Are we getting them out of harm's way? And this slide here kind of shows what I was just talking about, that open spaces is your #1 place. And then this was just for 2022. You can still see that it runs the gamut of just about everywhere else as well. One of the ones we talk about that has a really important teaching point, and where really as police we started looking this in 2 different ways. What we could do different, if you all remember the police response to that, and then what the people inside an active shooter event can do differently. And when we talk about Columbine, we talk about this slide here. This is a slide from the library, and I'll just use this TV to give you guys a real quick example here. This is where the majority of kids in Columbine died. If you remember, they were all under tables and hiding from this gunman, and the gunman just walked around those tables and legitimately executed them where they were hiding. What we started saying was, okay, police can do something different. We can get in there faster. This went on way longer than it should have went on. We've learned from it. We're going to do something different. But it would not have saved these kids in this library. But what could have helped them, and I'll try to, so all you can see this, is all these kids were in this library, and we have a 911 tape that we play where the librarian is on there saying, I can hear the gunshots, what should I do? And she's yelling at these kids to get under the table. And the dispatcher is telling them, hide under the table, the police are coming. Well, unfortunately, up here in this top left corner is an exit that leads out of that library and out of the school. And in the time she was on the phone with 911, had any one of us been in that situation and said, no, 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 we need to run, we need to get out of this situation, and had some situational awareness to know, I need to go, I know where an exit is, because I know my work, I know my, church, I know how to get out of here. She could have got those kids out of that library and out into the parking lot and running. And that's not to say anything against her. This was one of the first events that's ever happened, right? She had no idea. She had never thought that this could happen. Just like as police, we never thought, I was in the police academy when this was happening. We never thought we would respond to something like this, but we did. So that kind of started this whole run, hide, fight movement, saying, what can we all do differently so that we're not just hiding under tables waiting for the gunman to walk up to us and shoot us. So that's kind of where that started. And then there's been a few more incidents. We talked about Virginia Tech was a massive tragedy. 32 people got killed in that college. And on a police note, like, the guy went around and put chains around every door so we couldn't get in, right? And our sheriff the next week was, well, I guess we're putting bolt cutters in all of our cars because that's how we respond. They do something, we do something. But if you look at this, this is a graph of the second story of one of the lecture halls there. All of those red squares in there are kids that died. And you see, you can tell where he came from, right? Where all the red dots are is where he started. And then he worked himself down so that those teachers had time to barricade the doors and kids were jumping out of second story windows and all kinds of craziness. Well, there's a girl who talks about she was in that first classroom, he walked in, and she says that he walked in that classroom and just moved down the aisles of students and shot them where they sat, and none of them did anything. They were so paralyzed with fear that we all have that condition that at some point, your body just shuts down. And she says, I put my head down on my desk and said, wait your turn. Because again, she had never thought that this might happen to her. And that is why we do this, to say, the first time your brain is processing what you would do if something happens, don't let it be when the real life event happens. We tell our SWAT guys all the time, we can't prepare you for everything that you're going to see. You have to mentally train yourself to say, hey, if I went into this building, what would I do? If this happened here, if a shooting happens at a college campus, how am I going to react? Am I ready to go? All of these things. So that's kind of the teaching points that we try to talk to people. This will be the last one I talk about, but there was a shooting in Texas where, if you guys remember this, an armed guard actually ended up killing the bad guy, which is not the reason we talk about this. I use this slide for one reason. This is the church before a shot was fired, and this is the church after that shot was fired. You legitimately have people wiggling underneath the pews to hide from the gunfire, when this gunman was all the way at the front and the exits to the church are back here where these people are. So that's when we talk about our ability to respond to something happening. Trust me, if a gunshot went off in here right now, all of us are going to hit the deck, right? That's what we do. But then it's having some kind of plan of what would I do after? What do I do after I get down and I see, have I looked around? And we'll talk a little bit about like situational awareness, knowing where exits are and different avenues that I can get out of. This is one other thing that when we talk about open spaces, there was a special out there called Friday Night Lights, which talks about Friday night football games, and that they're seeing, and I know this was on our list of things to talk about, this escalation of these shootings at high school football games. And I think it's a lot of things, right? It's just gun violence in general in America. A lot of these are not mass shootings. They're just, I say that very lightly, they're just a shooting at a football game. But again, why is it happening here? Because the schools have done such a good job of keeping the guns out of the school, right? So if I'm a guy who wants to, get in a gunfight with people at my school, how am I gonna find a way to do that when the schools are so locked down that I can't get guns into the school? So those are some of the reasons why we said we have to do something different. Now we talk about what is that? What is that model that we as civilians can do that our kids have learned about, saying, okay, it started with just lockdown, kind of like Stephen said. First thing was lockdown, and now these schools are so barricaded. My kids' classrooms, you're not getting in there, right? As long as that teacher gets that door locked, like in Oxford had those night lock devices that go on the door and they penetrate right into the floor. You're not getting through these doors, right? So what can we do as civilians? We can, A, make our places safer, but if that doesn't work, what else can we do? So there's an FBI video. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's on our PowerPoint. If you go to FBI.gov, run, hide, fight shooting video is a 5-minute video that is awesome. It talks, it's not scary enough to where you couldn't show it to your kids, but they do a really good job of walking you through why you respond the way you respond. So it's a really good video. If you guys are taking notes or whatever and want to share it with people outside of here, it's a really good video. So the first thing we talk about outside of run, hide, fight is situational awareness. How can we get ourselves prepared to respond if something happens? And we use this chart all the time for our police officers, saying, there's different levels of awareness, where white is you're walking around with your head in your phone, walking into oncoming traffic and things like that. And then the far scale of that is black, where you say, I have not prepared enough to, if a gunshot goes off, I'm going to be like the girl in Virginia Tech and put my head down on the desk and say, wait your turn. And the scary thing is with these active shooters and the thing that I try so hard to stress to people, because I don't like telling people that this is a reality, but it is. And you have to understand that these guys that are coming into these campuses and into these businesses, they're not there to rob you, right? They're not there to take hostages. They are there for one reason. And if you don't accept that they are there to kill you, then the rest of everything else I tell you, you're going to call me crazy, right? Because if I say, hey, a guy with a gun came in here and we're all going to attack him with our bare hands, clearly that is not a fair fight. But if the option is hide under the table and wait for him to walk up to me, then I know which avenue that I'm going to take, right? So we need to operate in this yellow on a daily basis, this relaxed, prepared, but you're keeping an eye on two things. One, like what's going on around you, and I know we're going to talk about like okay to say and things like that. And then two, like if I'm at a restaurant, I had a teacher raise her hand with the best example of this. She said, I was at a club in Detroit with 7 of my girlfriends and a huge fight broke out. She's like, and at first we were like, oh man, they're fighting over there. And she said, next thing we knew, this whole club was like in a riot type fight and we thought we were going to get absorbed by it. She said, and the 7 of us sat at our table just waiting for it to come to us. And one girl in that group said, let's run through the kitchen, right? I know there's an exit through the kitchen and we can get out that way. All 7 of them got up, ran through the kitchen, ended up outside of the club, and we're like, oh my gosh, like that could have been a really scary situation. But had that one girl in that group not said, hey, I took a look around this place, I know how I can get out of this place, then what happens is that we all sit there and we wait for something to happen. So if you can operate in that yellow, and then if something happens, be ready to do something. And I'm telling you, just by sitting through this and thinking like, hey, in my place of work, what would I do if I heard gunfire down here? Well, I'd run this way. Well, what if that exit is blocked and I have to have a different plan? If you have trained your brain to do just a little bit of response to that, then if something does happen, you'll have some kind of plan. So run, hide, fight is the government model. It's the model we stick to. If you guys have heard, has anyone heard of Alice before? Alice is a big training company that does a lot of schools in Oakland County, and they're awesome. They do really good work. We model our training after what they do, but they are the same thing. Run, hide, fight is basically just giving yourselves, they call it options-based response, meaning do something. If you can run, run. If you can't run, then hide. And when we talk about hide, we're not talking about this kind of hiding, right? In your cubicle or under a table. We're talking about hiding here, where you have barricaded yourself in an area, and not only have you barricaded yourself, but you are ready in case that barricade doesn't work. You are ready to respond if you have to. I'll tell you guys one funny story, and I promise I'm going to try not to take up too much time, but it's my favorite story I've ever had teaching this. I'm teaching a group of kindergarten teachers, and if you all know anything about kindergarten teachers, right, they're the sweetest ladies in the world, and when I talk to them, I'm like, so we're going to talk about it. I don't want you to get upset. But they are also mama bears, right? They are all about protecting those kids. So sometimes we'll do scenario stuff with them where we have a guy with a Nerf gun come in and they are expected to throw things at him and do whatever. And this teacher walks up to me and she's like, you want me to do what? I'm like, it'll be okay. He's one of our guys. He's going to have a Nerf gun. I just want you to I said, just when he comes in, if you can't run, just kind of bear hug him, and that'll be the end of it. I just want you to know. And her and her friend look at each other, and they're like, and I'm like, so I go tell my partner, who's this big SWAT guy, and I'm like, hey, there's these 2 teachers over to the left. I go, be very nice, but I want you to turn to them because I want them to feel like they can do something, right? And he's like, okay. So he goes in, and he turns left, and instantly I felt bad for him. Because these teachers' eyes got about this big, and they're like, yeah! And they attack him. One of them tackles him. The other one, I'm not kidding, is choking him and trying to stick her fingers in his eyes. And I'm like, done, snare over, whatever. And the first teacher gets up and looks at me, she's like, I had so much rage, I was really gonna rip his eyeballs out. And the other one's like, I took that MFer to the ground, and she did not use that language. I'm like, kindergarten teachers. My buddy gets up, he's like, thanks, man. I'm like, I swear. So the cool thing of it was, like, it's funny, right? But those teachers looked at me and said, I thought about my kids, and I thought, if I don't do something, nobody will. Doug, and something came over me, and I said, that's why we do this. To know that if you have to do something, how much better is that than what they want to do, and what we've unfortunately seen in some of these elementary schools where the teachers take all their kids and they huddle them in a corner and they're trying to like tell them it's going to be okay, but that evil that walked through the door doesn't care if they're 5 or if they're 50, right? He has one goal. So that's what we try to stress when we talk about hiding, like hide those kids, get them out if you can, but if you have to fight, it might be you against some scary guy with a gun. So that's what we talk about with that. I think I lost my clicker. And then that kind of leads right into fighting. Barricading, we kind of just talk about different ways you can do it. This was Ohio State University. I know we don't talk much about them up here, but this is what, they had that lockdown when they had a kid with a knife up there, and some kid just snapped this picture of them barricading the door, but that was all through that messaging system at the university. And I always say, like, even if he got through that door, he's got a lot of work to do before he could get in to you, and that might be the time that you can go after him. So fighting improvised weapons, everything in this office, everybody's got a Yeti these days, right? The bigger, the better. Whip that thing at his head, do anything you can to fight him. And we also say one more thing here, because a lot of people don't know this. Do you all know you can text 911? A lot of people don't know that, and I tell that for if you're in a situation where you're hiding and you can't talk, or any other situation, especially your kids may find themselves in, they're in a car they don't want to be in, they're on a date that just went bad, text 911 is something everybody should know, that like you could be like, hey, I'm in this car and these dudes are talking about doing something that like I don't want to be a part of, but I don't know how to get out of it. Just remember that you guys can do that. And then finally, what can you do? Be aware of your surroundings, have a plan, be prepared to do what you have to do to survive, because that's where you're at. And then we have it in bold, and I know, again, we're going to talk about it in a minute. Like if you see something that doesn't seem right, tell somebody. Don't let that die with you. Don't be that person on the news saying, I thought it was weird that that guy was doing that, but I didn't want to say anything, right? Just don't be afraid to tell your boss, to tell your coworker, to tell, you know, a fellow student, like, hey, did you hear what he was saying, or did you see what he was carrying around, or whatever? Finally, there's oaklandsheriff.com is our department's website. We have a lot of good information on there, and like I said, if you guys are anywhere in the vicinity of Oakland County and have a church or a school or somewhere that you want us to come out and do our full-blown training for, we'd be more than happy to do that. Like I said, our sheriff is really pro getting the word out and trying to make sure as many civilians are prepared as they can be.
Thank you so much, Deputy Kammer. Great information, and I'm sure it's going to generate a lot of questions after our last speaker comes up. And next we have Mary Drew with Michigan State Police. She's going to offer us some information on ways to help prevent gun violence as we listen to her presentation on the state's OK to Say Michigan Student Safety Program. This program allows students to confidentially report tips on potential harm or criminal activities directed at students, schools, teachers, community members, or family. Welcome, Mary. We're going to talk about okay to say, and I think you're probably all familiar that you've done a great job publicizing this program through the school systems, so I think kids know what it is and they know what they need to do. Let's talk about how many tips were reported in the last couple of years, 2021 and 2022.
We're almost up to about 50,000 tips, and I'll have a breakdown of the numbers in just a minute. But we're really, particularly these last couple of years, we have seen our numbers dramatically increase. So the more we can get in front of kids, the more we can reinforce that message, the better the success. In fact, is one of the things that we do is we do presentations in front of students. And I can guarantee as soon as we finish a presentation, we immediately get tips almost within that day, where we are empowering kids to use their voice to step up and speak out and help to help a friend or a peer.
So what categories are identified in these tips? And you've said there's an increase, but what kinds of things are these kids reporting?
Really, they report anything. Our number one tip category overall is suicide threat. 1 in 5 kids in Michigan contemplate suicide, 1 in 6, make a plan, and 1 out of 11 students have attempted suicide 1 or more times. So suicide is actually our number one tip category. But we have seen a dramatic increase in bullying, for example. We actually, sadly, we're seeing an increase in sexual assault. And after the Oxford tragedy, of course, the planned school attack tips, we just, it was like drinking through a fire hydrant. We just had so many tips, and I know it was a nightmare for, the school, the law enforcement who are trying to, track down these tips and, the families impacted. Your program starts, what grade do you start talking about okay to say? We actually start talking about it now in elementary school, in 4th and 5th grade, and then, of course, middle school and high school. So we really introduce the concept and really trying to get kids to understand the difference between telling and reporting, and that it's okay to say something if you're concerned or you're aware of a situation. So we really are about trying to use very child-friendly language, but our number one priority, what we always stress in every single one of our presentations, please, 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 go to a trusted adult. Tell a teacher, tell a principal, tell a school resource officer. Please tell somebody. And if a trusted adult isn't available for whatever reason, then there's always okay to say.
So how do you get the word out to the kids? I know you go through the schools most of all, but you want
Right.
to keep it fresh in their minds so when an event does happen, they know what to do.
Right. So, we have, we really are, we try to get that message in front of kids over and over again. So, for example, we have it on the buses. 800,000 kids ride buses every day, so we have it right in front of them. And we've trained all of our bus drivers, so 18,000 bus drivers, and then we gave them all okay to say t-shirts. So every Friday they were wearing their okay to say t-shirt. It really is about getting that message in front of them. We have posters and we have stickers. I try to get them in bathrooms and locker rooms. Maybe that's the only time where a kid maybe has a moment to themselves. We are involved with the Michigan High School Athletic Association, so we try to get we go to different expos, especially if we know we have a high number of students there. So try to get them on the back of school calendars, on the back of student IDs. We try to, try to come up with unique ways. Again, it's just reinforcing that message that it is okay to say something.
So where does the money come from to pay for all of this?
Actually, it comes from general funds. So, through allocation through the legislature and through the governor, and that's how we get our funding.
So where is your staff located?
We're actually within the Michigan State Police in our headquarters, but I have a team of presenters that are located around the state of Michigan. We're looking at expanding our team, so if you're interested in doing presentations, we'd love to talk to you. But what we're trying to do is we have them strategically located across the state of Michigan so that if we get a request in a school, that we can have a presenter either go and do the presentation in person or we can do it virtually. But what we try to do is identify a school and say, what kind of issues are you having, maybe some challenges that you're having, that we can sort of reinforce that message. So,
When you talk about the number of tips that you get in, how many people are sorting through these tips, and how do you investigate them all?
well, really, we have 6 technicians who work around the clock. We're fortunate, in fact, tomorrow we're going to be interviewing to hire 2 more. And the idea is that our team are really experts, and when I mean our team, our MIAC, our technicians, are really skilled at trying to get kids to open up. Because most of the tips that are coming in are coming through either a text, through the mobile app, or through the website. And it really is trying to open up a relationship where a student feels safe to be able to tell you what's going on. I mean, you could start off a tip with, hi. Hi, it's okay to say. How can I help? I'm worried. What are you worried about? I'm worried about my friend Bobby. What's going on with your friend Bobby? And we have to go at a kid and ask questions, not coming at them like that. I mean, it really has to be really gentle. So, because again, kids don't tell you everything at once. So it really can take anywhere from 6 to 8 hours before we get enough actionable information, that who, the what, the where, the when, the why. We try to get as much information as we possibly can. If there is a screenshot, again, kids live on social media. And if we see something, and if they see something and they can include that, then what we want to do is we want to pass the information on and get that to the right people who can help. And one of the things that we find is that most of our tips are coming in after the school day is closed. So having a point of contact, an emergency contact at a school is really important to us. If there is any question at all, that there's life safety, we pass on that tip immediately. But if it's a tip, let's say a kid is being bullied, and by no means am I saying that bullying isn't important. It really is. We've got to try to address that. But that's a tip that can wait till the next day. So again, trying to get school contacts identified so that if we have a situation that we can pass it on and get it to the right people who can help.
So what can all of us in this room do to help your organization?
Well, I think, again, if you have kiddos, your nieces and nephews, just say, hey, have you heard about this program? One thing, we have a mobile app. If you can get your kids to download it. But what we want to try to do is, again, try to reinforce that message is, please, you can always come to me. I'm here to listen to you. I want to help. And then communicating with the schools. But again, if I'm not available, if you don't know what to do, please, pass it on. We don't know whether that little information that we pass on to a school can help kind of put together an idea of what's going on in a kid's life, because sometimes those tips help kind of identify a student who's struggling, and again, to get kids the help they need. So really, that's really what we're trying to do. Our team are expert at getting information and passing it on. We don't dictate how a school investigates a matter. Sometimes we're passing on information the school's already aware of, but again, we don't know that. We pass on all the information as long as we have those key details. So really trying to get kids to understand, like, my friend is thinking about killing himself. That's not a sufficient tip. My friend John Smith from blank school is thinking about hurting themselves. Now we've got enough information so that we can pass it on. So again, those key details are really important.
And these tips go back to the schools or law enforcement, depending on
Right.
the situation.
Absolutely. And sometimes if we have child abuse, our folks are mandated reporters, and so it will involve involving protective services. And then what we will do is we always then pass it on to the school, which I think is really important because, again, our schools, our administrators are mandated reporters. So even just having some awareness, like, hey, we got an issue, with Johnny, and if I'm kind of cued in, maybe the next time I see Johnny, hey, Johnny, how are things going? What's going on in life? Taking an extra moment to engage that student, I think, is so important.
Thank you, Mary
welcome.
Drew from Michigan State Police OK to Say program. We did promise a question and answer segment in our program, so we know each of you has a voice, and we encourage you to use them now. So if you have a question, raise your hand. I can come over. We can get our speakers back up here. The microphones are on. I can walk over to the speakers. Anyone have any questions?
Hi. This is probably for the police officers, either of you. But how do you feel the new red flag laws will help you out, especially with this okay to say?
You're talking about red flags for purchase of guns? I will hesitate to say, I guess we'll wait and see. There's really not much good way of, until it gets implemented and see how it helps to curb that purchase of guns from people who, who have been red flagged that don't need them. But it's hard to say. There's so many different gun laws out there and the way that they affect the purchase of guns, and then, as we all know, that's not stopping guns from getting in most people's hands that want to do bad things with them. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but I just don't know. I guess all I can say is everything is, I always say, like, try a bunch of things, right? Try to do a bunch of things to keep guns out of the hands of people that don't deserve them. There's no right or wrong, idea. Just, hey, let's do this, and let's try to keep the guns out of the hands of people that don't, that shouldn't have them.
Okay, anyone else? Questions? Okay.
I know that we heard a lot about mass shooting events, but I wondered if any of, whether they're healthcare professionals or some of the law enforcement, could talk about actually the, what I've heard is that the higher risk actually comes from in-home domestic violence use of guns, and kind of what can be done to curb that.
Right. I'm going to give you each a microphone. Would you like to start?
Thanks. So, who was it that asked? I feel like my back's right to you. So your question was, how can we curb the use of guns in domestic violence situations? And I don't disagree with that. And again, I'm not trying. Any one of your questions that are going to deal with, like, taking guns away from people or Second Amendment stuff is going to be hard for us to answer as police officers. But it's going to be very hard to curb gun violence in a home where you're allowed to have a gun in that home, right? I guess a little bit of it would go back to kind of that whole see something, say something, whether it's in schools or your workplace, or you have a friend you think might be in a situation that is dangerous for them. It doesn't have to be guns, right? That you have to be that friend to them to say, hey, we need to get you out of this situation before it escalates to, because they may not be thinking like you are. They're thinking emotionally and relationship-wise, and this is the reasons I need to be in this situation I'm in. But that is a really broad, like, gun violence question that as police, trust us, we daily are trying to figure out how to determine the people that should and shouldn't have them, and that not just for our safety, right, but the safety of the people that we're trying to protect as well.
Dr. Martin?
I think it's working now. We saw a steady rise in gun-related events here in the Lansing community, so I'll just talk about Sparrow-related data. Through the 2000 teens peaking in 1920, 2021, we saw a little bit of a decrease, likely related to people, maybe not leaving their home for the, the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, though, and my colleagues can correct me if I start speaking wrong about the data, but this year will surpass our peak year, unfortunately, so that gun-related violence is, those events are unfortunately on the rise. This event got a lot of press again locally, nationally, but on the 4th of July this year, let's just talk about there were more shooting events that probably didn't make it outside of our local news. There were more victims than there were the night of the MSU shooting event on 2 separate related events that occurred on the south side of Lansing and just not far from the Capitol. So it's an unfortunate reality here. So it is, the areas that we talk about, I feel like we're getting feedback somewhere, but I hope that the data, I hope 2024 is a different year for us, but unfortunately I think 2023 for the events that we care for here at Sparrow Hospital out of our Level 1 Trauma Center will be one of our highest years, if not the highest for what we care for in Sparrow Lansing. So it's not just these mass events, it's they get reported out every morning at our daily safety tech, and just not this morning, but yesterday we had an individual brought in due to a gun-related incident. So it's unfortunately becoming a pretty regular theme for us at Sparrow.
Anyone? Oh, okay.
Hi, a comment and a question for the officers. I did not know about the 911 text option, and I really appreciate that. Is that a standard part of training for our elementary and high school and college students?
So what I would say is that we're trying to get it to that level, right? We are pushing as hard as we can to get into all the schools to let all of them know. Is it standardized? It's not. Are there school districts in Oakland County who have not invited us to come talk to them at all? Absolutely. Like, we are doing our best to get the word out, and this is how we think it is the best way to do it, is hopefully I tell this room of 100 people, and each one of you tell 10 people. It's not everywhere in the state, but it's in Ingham County, it's in the Tri-County area, I imagine it's over in Grand Rapids. It's becoming very standardized. But to answer your question, we are doing our best, but there's nothing, the colleges do a great job, I think, of trying to inform for the safety of their students, but there's nothing standardized out there.
Just to follow up, wouldn't that be a good start to the broadcast tonight for the news? A good intro? I think that would be great.
Thank you for your story idea. We always take story ideas. Lisa.
Good job. When my children were young enough to go to the pediatrician, we spent a lot of time speaking about the safety of their car seat. Were they in the right size? Was it the right? I understand now that pediatricians have a question, maybe 2 or 3, that are asked of their families that have to do with storing guns safely in the home. So is there anyone in the pediatric world here? Okay, that can help us with that.
So I'm Keith English. I'm the chair of the Department of Pediatrics and Human Development in the College of Human Medicine. And I was going to ask to make a comment next anyway. I wanted to thank everybody for being here today, the panelists, everybody here who's here to help address this problem. I mean, this is a national tragedy, and the status quo is not acceptable. We've got to do better than this, folks. We don't need a world where kids have to worry this much about an active shooter in their schools. And the comment I wanted to make, and I think Denny addressed it a little bit a minute ago, is the greatest risk to children being killed by a firearm is not homicide, it's suicide. So that's where the mental health crisis overlaps with access to firearms. So if we could do a better job of keeping a handgun in particular out of the home of a teenager or young adult who's thinking about committing suicide, we would do a lot of good. So that's something that is doable. We're trying to do it. We've been trying to do it for years. And unfortunately, it is part of the routine pediatric visit now. Do you have guns in your home? If so, do you store them safely where a child cannot get to them? Do you know of the children, the people that your children visit and spend the night with?
My question is for the OK to say, with more and more families coming to the United States, if they are refugees, how do you pass the information to kids that they don't speak the language? Do you have a program or a way to help them?
I will be honest and tell you, we don't have the ability to. We have gone to schools where they will bring in an interpreter, and we are so happy when that happens. But that's not something that I could do in terms of providing it in different languages. We just don't have the resources, truthfully, to be able to do that. But if we're invited in and they help with an interpreter, our team is very well trained to work and make sure that we help get that message to anybody who wants to hear it. So, in any language, it's always okay to say.
Okay. I saw you had a question earlier.
I just had a general question regarding safety strategies for situations outside of the mass shooting opportunities. So in the domestic setting, what should our safety strategies be in a small domicile type of setting?
See if this there goes. In terms of gun violence in general,
We can't run or hide very easily in the house. I mean, I don't.
okay, yeah. So let's look at it just from that small setting type rationale of gun violence, right? And we got called by a bank one time to come in and talk to them about armed robberies and what should we be telling our employees to do? And I said, tell them to give them the money and hope they leave. We're not solving all violence here with guns by saying do this way, right? If there is any other option out there, then, if someone comes up to you on the street and points a gun at you and says, give me your wallet, here's my wallet, sure, right? But if you find yourself in a situation where, whether it's a mass shooting type situation or if, you're out to dinner with friends and all of a sudden there's a domestic issue happens and there's nothing else you can do, and that's when we talk about run, hide, fight, the run, then hide, then fight is not in that order, right? If somebody pulls a gun out next to you, wherever you're at, your best chance of survival may be to try to control the gun. And I know when we get into teaching teachers about this, it sounds wild, right? To say hey, you're not armed, but I need you to attack. If I was going to tell my wife, hey, if you're somewhere and someone pulled a gun out and starts shooting people, your best chance of survival might be, and we're now talking two totally different ends of the spectrum, right? Talking about how to stop it before it happens, all the way to you have zero chance of doing anything else except to, counter violence with violence, because that is the only way that you may survive this. So that model, like I said, that model runs true whether you're inside, outside, small setting, big setting. If you can run, always run. I told before, when my kids' school were just teaching lockdown and that's it and there's no other option, my kids knew the option was, I don't care, you run, right? If you can run. But the answer is almost always going to be the same. If there is another option, take that option. As police, that's our life, right? That's every day is trying to find an option that works so that we don't have to escalate to some use of force type thing. It's no different than what I would tell you is if you find yourself in a situation, if there's no other response, respond with violence and like your life depends on it, because in a situation like that, it absolutely does. And I know that's a scary thought to any of us. To me, if I'm unarmed, it's scary, but that's what I would tell my kids. Like, hey, if you have to, fight for your life.
Questions?
Thank you. So, at present, I think we're in gridlock in our legislature, unfortunately, on gun control issues. But there was a great story. I'm sure it was WILX that reported this. Just this past weekend of a church that sponsored a gun buyback program. And so in the spirit of small steps, I think they doubled, as I tracked the story, they doubled their intake, if you will, of guns on this gun buyback program last year to this year. So in the spirit of small steps, maybe one of the outcomes of the gathering today could be an action step to increase gun buyback programs. It's small, it's simple, but small steps, if we can't make big steps, might be a great way to start. So I highlight, I'm sure, a WILX story that might be connected.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Okay, I'm coming. I'll just squeeze through here, sorry.
This is not a question, but I find reading or seeing the news sometimes, I think that all of us, if we're in situations where maybe we're driving down the road and somebody cuts us off or does something irrational or weird, there's an inclination to retaliate or get something. Maybe it's, you don't know who you're dealing with. It may be to just back off. This person, you don't know what's under his seat or inside his glove box. And, might be a good time to just say, I don't know what this person or who I'm dealing with. Might be a good time to just walk away from it and say, see you later.
Good point. Anyone else?
I have two things. First, the text messaging issue. It was actually on the NBC Nightly News the other night, if anyone saw it. And I guess the one thing that I would emphasize, and it was on the slide, is that you need to write, or you need to text your address or your location, because the way text messages are sent, they're pinged differently than calling on your phone. And so there's a big gap in the messaging system for 911. If you don't put down your location, they can't find you. So just want everybody to be aware of that. The other thing I wanted to add was probably about 18 or 20 years ago, the American Medical Association Alliance showcased a program called ASK, A-S-K, and it basically encouraged people, parents especially, to ask whether there were guns in any of the homes where your children go to visit. And I think we've kind of gotten away from that. And your home may be secure, and your teen may be secure in your home, but you don't know where your teen is going, or other teens who may be suicidal and may have access to guns at their friend's home. So I think we really need to think about normalizing the concern about gun safety in homes, and encourage parents to ask their friends, their children's friends, whether guns are secured in their homes.
Very good point. Anyone else? Okay. We haven't heard from this side of the room, so this is good.
I think the OK to Say program sounds amazing, and it would have been such a comfort, I think, in a way, to know that there was a safe place to report things as a kid when I was growing up. As a parent or just an adult, what resources do we have to report suspicious things or things we're worried about, or, if my friend Shirley seems like she wants to do harm to somebody, you know, like I wouldn't feel inclined to call the police on her. Is there a mechanism for grown-ups to use things like this?
If you're talking about whether or not adults are using okay to say on other students, they are. We do get tips from parents. Maybe a child has come to them and they've seen something online where somebody is talking about causing harm and they don't know what to do and there's, you know, not enough. So we will get tips from parents on that very issue. But otherwise, you know, I'm of the belief, like if something seems wacky, then contact the police. I can't stress that enough. You know, I think they would rather investigate a situation, determine, you know what, after taking a look at the situation, there's really nothing here. But I think, you know, I think we all need to, you know, I think this is one of the things about okay to say, I think it's about training kids to be good citizens, you know, about it is okay to say something. It is our responsibility to care for one another. And we need to take every threat seriously. That's the bottom line. If something just seems off, tell somebody. Again, I really think our law enforcement partners would say, yeah, we'd rather, you know, take a look, you know, determine, hey, it really wasn't there, than to miss something and, you know, gosh, I woulda, coulda, shoulda said something. Again, that's how I feel.
Yeah, and I will, as a police officer, second that what makes the news on a daily basis of what police officers do is maybe 5% of our daily routine. The majority of, you know, of what we do is problem solvers, right? And I agree with you, like I don't want to send a police car to my friend's house, you know, just, hey, there's a police in front of your house, what's going on? But if you feel that your friend is either in danger of hurting themselves or in a situation, I can't tell you how many rides to husbands I give, like to a hotel for the night, you know, or to a buddy's house, or, you know, take a wife to her mom's house or whatever. Just say, hey, for the night, there's no crime has been committed here, but clearly, you know, someone was worried about you enough or you were worried enough to call. Let's take a break. Let's, you know, reevaluate this tomorrow or whatever the case is. That, you know, that is, when Shane and I, you know, we've been off the road for a little while, but he'll tell you the same thing. Like, that was 90% of what we did was like solve problems just to say, hey, let's see what we can do today to make this better and safer. And then let's reevaluate tomorrow and then maybe get some different professionals involved in this. But, you know, like I said, okay to say or, you know, do something or see something, say something, all that. You never want to be that person that had a friend that you knew was in some kind of trouble and you were too afraid to, you know, first you offer to help, but if that's, you know, if that's not the situation, let the police go there and you know, 95% of police out there are really good at what they do and are really good at reading between the lines and saying like, hey, you know, maybe it'd be a good day. Maybe you come with, you know, let me give you a ride somewhere. Hey, I'll stand by, call a friend. Why don't you have, you know, maybe the friend that called us, why don't you, you know, go to her house for the night and, you know, see if we can't work this out.
Any more questions? I have a question for Stephen. What is the mood on campus 8 months after the mass shooting?
I'll stand up. I think that there is definitely a scarce mentality from students, and I don't know how accurate it is. Obviously, it's just kind of college kids talking. I know that students are frustrated with certain things on how buildings are locked or how classrooms can't lock individually. But I don't know how accurate that is. I don't attend classes. I'm a master's student, so everything's online. But I've heard that from students. I've heard that cameras and stuff like that. They just want those all updated, but that takes a lot of money. So, I mean, I'm just, you know, a student, an athlete. But yeah, that takes obviously a lot of school funding and stuff, and it is a hefty price and stuff. So I'm assuming that those things will probably come along each year. You kind of chip away at that stuff, but I think students do find themselves frustrated with that, but that's pretty much it. I do think that it is
Do you think
safer.
they had the resources they needed to heal from this? Do you think the healing is
Yeah, I think
in a good
that,
place?
I mean, it's not everyone's going to get healed, you know, within 6 months and everything. So everything's a process. You're going to heal over time. You're not going to heal right away. But I think that they handled everything with as best as you could. I mean, it was kind of circumstance that yes, police force they do prepare for this, but like students don't really prepare for this. Probably faculty and staff don't prepare for this. It's kind of one of those things where you hear about it for your whole life going to school, and you kind of take it for granted, or you don't take it as serious, and then the moment it happens, it is a big issue and kind of something that you weren't prepared for, but you took for granted, and you don't really pay attention. Or I remember growing up, we had okay to say in our school, and I probably didn't pay attention as much in that as a kid. Obviously, that's the maturity thing, but now I paid attention and thankful that they came and spoke at our school and kind of had that opportunity to reach out to people and talk.
Thank you. Have there been any women that are mass shooters? Okay. There was one year where some of the retail information is sent out, particularly at the holiday time. One of the fastest selling items through Neiman Marcus were luxury bags that have a pocket for handguns, either Saturday night specials or whatever. They couldn't keep them in stock, which was completely shocking to me. We hope that there's been an opportunity to learn a lot today. We do have just a couple little things to finish up with. We're passing out survey forms. Do you guys think it's fun to plan things like this? Easy? There's a lot of information that we think we've covered, but yet still it's kind of awkward. But we were able to capture a lot of different voices, which was our goal. So academic situations, those in law enforcement, those who've experienced the terrible nature and healthcare of what is happening with gun violence, and a particular student who had his heart and soul kind of changed a little bit, but managed to share your knowledge, so that's completely appreciated, and a lot of respect is given to everybody here that was part of this. I really expected a little more robust question and answer. So we have the mechanism to take questions from you that we can pose to the people that were our experts and get back to you, as long as we have your email addresses. So please be comfortable to write those things down, to send them to us. We'll be able to do that. I think you can reach either myself or someone with the Medical Society that can help you. We do have just a couple little items, and I have a joke actually, which is kind of in question. Well, if you know the people involved in it, I think you'll laugh. My husband and I were in Tucson, Arizona for a conference, and in Tucson, Arizona, we thought best thing we could do is buy a pair of cowboy boots to take home, right? So we did a little research. We found that there was this great place, pretty famous. So we thought, we've got an hour and a half before the next seminar, let's go. So we walk up the steps, and there's a gentleman there seated in a chair with guns in a holster, and he has the logo of the company that we're going to. So as a joke, I say to him, so do you have to like break up fights when somebody's fighting over a pair of boots? Is that why you have your gun? And he was kind of a little slow to respond, but he said, well, I keep this on hand in case my wife shows up. I want to keep her out of this store. She buys way too many boots. So my husband said, could I borrow that gun? Kind of sick on that one. Our intentions were to engage and educate, resulting in advocacy and action. Special thanks to WILX, of course, and Ann Emmerich, who's really been a champion for so many things in our community, but you really were gracious in your support and promotion. Now that we have all of your information, we'll be able to get advance notice of our fall focus for 2024, and we look forward to having you be part of our event. So thank you to everyone very, very much. And we want you to flip a coin. The winner can take the centerpieces home. I have handled these things for not one, not two, but 3 events recently, and if I ever touch them again, I'll be, drop kicking them out of the parking lots. So please take the pumpkins, take the whatever interests you, but we're going to leave the place clean. Turn in your survey forms, please, and join us for Fall Focus 2024. Thank you all very, very much.